Hello everybody, my name is Laura. You're watching the Beanbird 2 channel where we talk about the goodness of God and share testimonies. And today I have a testimony of something that we went through where it didn't all get wrapped up neatly in a neat bow. Sometimes we go through experiences and it feels like we're losing. Feels like, things aren't working out for us. But even in those times, there's glimmers of hope of the Lord working in our lives, and we just need to focus on those things. And so what happened to us was about 5 years ago. There was a snow day, and my son had gone outside with the neighbor kids to play in the snow. And it was a short time later, he returned back to the house crying hysterically. And I saw that he had blood coming from his face, and I was completely shocked. And I looked in his mouth, and one tooth was completely missing, and the other tooth was broken and half there, but and very wiggly. And I was like, what happened? And he said that they were doing a snowball fight with all the neighbor kids, and one of the kids got really angry, and he picked up a rock and threw it at my son's face. So I got my son to calm down, and I called the dentist and I asked what I should do. It was a Sunday, and I would want to point out that I was thankful that she answered her phone on a Sunday. And she said, I can get to the office in about 30 minutes to see him. She said, but if you can, see if you can go back to the scene and find his tooth. So I was like, okay. So I went over there with my son, and I asked him, where were you standing when it happened? And he showed me the general area, and I began to look for his tooth. And it was only a short little bit of me looking before I started to feel like I would never find the tooth in this environment. There was snow, and then there was footprints where the mud had mixed with the snow, and there was patches of grass. And I was looking around and I thought, I'll never find the tooth in the snow. I mean, it'd be like impossible. And so that moment I decided to pray. I said, Lord, please help me find his tooth. I'll never find it in this environment. And I thought it was close to impossible. Well, just then, the neighbor of the house that had the snowball fight, she came out and she said, is everything okay? Can I help you with anything? And I said, yes, I'm looking for his tooth. The dentist said that, she might be able to put it back in. So immediately she starts helping me look for the tooth. And she bends down after like 2 seconds and she's like, is this it? And I was like, how in the world? She picks up his tooth and I'm like, that's it. I was like, thank you. So we grabbed the tooth and we go to the dentist, and she was able to put the tooth back in, and she provided a stent to support the teeth to hold them together until we could get future work done. And when we had gotten home from the dentist, meanwhile, being a Sunday, my husband and I were both home. We had called the neighbor of the boy who had thrown the rock, and they weren't answering their phone. They weren't answering any text messages. And the boy who had thrown the rock was a baseball player, and so he had good aim. And when it happened and he saw that my son was bleeding, he fled the scene and ran away. So we decided, after a little bit of them not replying to any of our text messages or phone calls, we called the police because I wanted to record the incident. And so shortly the police were there. We told him what happened. He looked at my son and he said, you're smart to call. It's best that you let us handle this type of thing. So he goes around the block to knock on the door, no answer. And so then he looks up in the system and he gives them a call. And the father of that family had answered the phone, and he told the officer that they were at the grocery store. And the officer asked him some questions, and then the officer came back around to our house, and he was like, unfortunately the father was pretty rude, and he was very abrupt in ending the phone call. He was very short with me. He said, unfortunately we see this a lot with people. And he tried to show us like what we could do as far as like getting my son's medical expenses taken care of. And so we took down his advice, and the neighbors never did come over. They never apologized. They didn't follow up or anything. Meanwhile, my son, who was supposed to be in stable condition, kept complaining about pain in his teeth. And so I took him back to the dentist, and she looked at him, and I said, he keeps saying that there's pain in this area. And she was just like, no, it's just the healing process. I'm sure he's traumatized by what happened, but just, he's fine. And of course, he was traumatized. After that happened, he slept in our room for several weeks. He was too afraid to sleep alone. He kept having dreams that his teeth were falling out. I mean, it was just a very difficult time for him. And as a mother, it hurt me that he was feeling that. But I also felt like I was grieving the loss of his teeth because his teeth looked super messed up. And I thought he'll never have his natural teeth again. They'll always be broken. And I didn't think it would affect me the way that it did, but there was some sort of mourning that took place with that whole thing. So he kept complaining about the teeth, and I just felt like I believed him. And so I talked to my son and my husband, and my husband said, well, there's another dentist. We could get a second opinion, somebody who he really knew well and was credentialed really high. He said, let's have him take a look and just make sure everything's okay. So that dentist went and took a look at his mouth, and he said, actually, he has a double infection and he needs to see an endodontist right away. And of course, I was somewhat shocked, but I also had believed my son when he said that there was more going on. So we went to the endodontist, and then they gave us the bad news that he was going to need a double root canal. And so the medical bills were just, coming in. And so he, of course, was terrified of having a double root canal. But the guy was a Christian endodontist, and he did a wonderful thing where he had my son put on headphones of Christian music. And he's like, I just want you to focus on the music while I work on your teeth. And I thought, it's such a blessing. I mean, I was so thankful for that. And I have just never experienced that in any dentist office before. And of course, I thanked him profusely. And he also had shared with my son that he became an endodontist because his teeth were knocked out. And so they had that in common. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful blessing that was, that they could kind of share in that experience together, and it helped my son feel better, even though it was terrible that it happened to either one of them. That's very sad. But so by the end of all this, my son's teeth looked still kind of messed up. I'll show a picture of what his teeth looked like after all the work was done. There was a lot of gum swelling, and his teeth didn't look anything like what they used to look like before this whole incident happened. And they told me that when he was in his 20s, that he would need to have those teeth extracted, and that he would have to have implants put in both of those teeth. And so they gave me some quotes for the implants, and of course it'll change when he's in his 20s. But at the time, they said you're looking at a cost of around $15,000 to $20,000 to extract these teeth and do 2 new implants, and plus all the grafting that would be required and the whole thing. So they gave me an estimate. And then so we had $7,000 in dental bills to repair his mouth, plus the $15,000 to $20,000 for the implants that would be required when he was in his 20s. So we wanted to get reimbursed for this, and the neighbors were still hiding from us, and so we decided to take them to court to get it settled, or to handle it in some way through that. So after we filed for that, the neighbors did appear on our front porch. So then the father came and he apologized, which was the first we had seen him in months. And he said, it wasn't right that, my son had done this, and he wanted to make things right. And he said, I want to give you my insurance information. And we were thankful to finally receive that, because we hadn't up until this point. And we thanked him for that. And of course, we forgave him. But then the bad news came. Where the bad news came in was that in North Carolina, the law was that if you have a minor, in this case, it was a minor that had injured my son, and that that they had a max amount that could be paid out through that whole thing was $2,000, and we already had $7,000 worth of bills plus the future implants cost. And so of course we were upset because I thought we shouldn't be paying for this. We didn't do this and this wasn't our fault. And I felt like I wanted things to be made right for my son. And the justice in me was just feeling like this isn't fair, you know? So I called a couple lawyers and they looked at the situation and I was like, is this true? And they were like, yep, it's true. Both people confirmed that there was a $2,000 payout maximum that would be paid out in cases like this. And so through talking to the insurance company, I talked to them and they said, look, we're willing to give you, we're willing to pay at first they came back and they said they would give us $5,000. And I was like, look, I really feel like we should get all of the medical paid, which is $7,000. And they're an insurance company. They can totally pay $7,000. So through going back and forth, anyway, long story, they ended up offering us the $7,000. But it had to go through a judge still. So when we went to the judge, the insurance company had told us, look, we're going to give you the $7,000 to pay the medical, but that's our max offer. We won't do any more. And if you reject this offer, we will just give you the $2,000. So it was a little bit of a threat. So when the judge reviewed my case, she looked at all the evidence and all the stuff, and she said, $7,000 seems pretty low. And she's like, are you sure that you think this is fair? And honestly, I didn't think it was fair at all. I felt like I wanted the implants to be covered. The only reason we couldn't do the implants at that time was because he had to be mature age. He had to have his bone structure in place. And but I said that we would agree to the $7,000 because I knew that they had already threatened me that if I denied it, they would give me the $2,000. So we accepted the $7,000. And even though we had a lot of prayer around that situation, my son still suffered a lot of trauma from that story. And also, I felt like we still are going to have to pay for the implants in the future. And in a lot of ways, the people that caused the damage got away with it. And sometimes people do get away with things. And sometimes justice isn't served here on earth. And it's hard and it's painful. But we just have to remember that the lowercase God of this world is Satan. And things are not always fair here on earth, but someday we'll be in heaven and God will make right all the things that were wrong and everything will be fair and just. And that really the best thing I can do is just to forgive and let it go and just trust God to make up the difference. And sometimes, things happen where you financially end up worse off, like as in this situation. And I try to think about long term, the way that God works things out. Maybe in this case we came out behind, but there's a lot of things that could have happened that could have made it worse. And, God prevents those things in our lives and we don't even know what we were protected from because it never happened, if you know what I mean. Could be a sickness that you were protected from that you never had, or maybe a car accident that you were protected from that, could have happened, but the Lord avoided it for you. And so I try to always think of the things that God saved us from, that, we were spared from going through those experiences, and try to realize that God will, in the end, make everything fair. And that when we forgive others and we heal our own hearts, and it kind of makes us free to, walk in the Spirit when we're having a forgiveness. And it makes us lighter when we release our grudges and just trust in the Lord, and that the justice and all the vengeance belongs to the Lord. And so I just wanted to say that. I know that story kind of maybe sounds like a little bit of a downer, but it's realistic, and sometimes things just don't work out the way that we want them to, and we have to have peace with that, and knowing that it's out of our control, and we can just do what we can, and then trust God with the rest. So, um, yeah, but God has a special calling on your life, and He wants to do big things with you in your life as you trust and surrender to Him. And so just continue to trust in the Lord every day, surrender, and just forgive any grudges, or if anybody ever did anything against you, just release it. And even more so, if you can pray for those people that hurt you, because that's what we're called to do. So thank you.